organizing the reading tonight, and to the bookstore and building staff for making us able to be in this space and have the lovely books to check out afterwards, and all of you for attending. This is going to be a very exciting, dynamite reading by two writers I'm very excited to host here at Notre Dame. And I'm sure everybody here knows this, but before too long it'll be time to sign up for classes for next semester. And of course we have a full complement of creative writing courses, undergraduate courses for folks to check out. And we also have all kinds of exciting programs like our summer creative writing workshop at Kyle Morris. So if you're here for writing, there's more where that came from. Please check out our website. And one last pitch is for some events that are coming up. Next week, the Pulitzer Prize-winning poet Natasha Trethewey is going to read at McKenna at 7 on Wednesday night, which is co-sponsored by the IRR and the Institute for Advanced Study here at Notre Dame, probably other wonderful units of the university. So if you want to come out for an exciting reading and fellowship with lots of different folks from across the university, that is Natasha Trethewey on Wednesday at 7. And then following that up, at the end, after Thanksgiving, Tess Gunty, who is an alumni of our undergraduate creative writing honors program, is also a National Book Award finalist for fiction. And she is going to come for 2 days in Notre Dame, do a Q&A here, and then a reading at the public library, the new main library, so with folks from all over town and all over the region. So it'll be very, very exciting to come hear her awesome book and cheer her on, because she really represents like what we can do when we all work together, support each other, and really follow our writing where it leads. So Natasha Trethewey, and then after Thanksgiving, Tess Gunty. Posters are already everywhere. Okay, and now I shall introduce the readers. I'm going to introduce them both at once, and then they're going to do their thing, and then afterwards we're going to mix and mingle in my books. So that is the plan for tonight. Here we go. All right, so as William Blake so indelibly reminds us in his Proverbs of Hell, when the doors of perception are cleansed, the world will appear as it is, infinite. So maybe when the doors of convention are taken down from their hinges, we can sit on those bare frames and gaze on more dazzling skies. On the hinge of this overwarm and yet unpromising fall, it is a pleasure and a tonic to welcome Mike Corrao and Valerie Hsiung to our campus. These are two poet artists whose bodies of work continually devise novel ways to formulate what is just now coming into view. Read separately and together, their books, digital installations, and performances represent a seed bank riddled with dank futurity, attending towards a capacious, unimaginable something where just maybe we can find pleasure and respite after the exhaustion of harm. Valerie Hsiung's 5 books, and there may be more in print by the time of our event tonight, represent a continuous action of thought, constantly rephrasing, reversing, permutating, and extending itself. Her persistent concern is the sentence and the syntax of interpersonal and state power it supports and can be made to betray. Hsiung's work treats language as auto-archaeology, secret treasure, and space junk. It circulates in the speaker's mind, throat, community, in the way she is addressed by, mimics, and responds to the boss, the teacher, the immigration official, the mother, the lover, and the reader. Language becomes the vector of many forces crossing, the ill and hopeful beams of warfare, eroticism, migration, curiosity, family life, and even DNA, which has its own occult prerogatives. As one speaker in her poems confides, quote, "I learned to read via occupational hazard manuals." This punning on occupational as both a workplace and a military regime out of place shows us the agility with which Hsiung is able to hoist up this whole rotten world with her merest gesture, even if she is not able to flick it away. Hsiung is part of a sisterhood of artists, including Renee Gladman, Teresa Hakton-Cha, and all those who bend language to make a travesty of power. And it's an honor to hear her work tonight. Mike Corrao's body of work, as it went theatrical, unnervingly direct about the body and its fortunes and misfortunes, and a sea change for the form of the book itself. In a decade in which we were told that we would no longer, quote, need physical books, Corrao has continuously remade the book for the digital age by showing what happens when a book becomes host for the parasite of digitality, which in turn returns it, miraculously enough, to its bookiness, a new posthumous unkillable form. In reading Corrao's books, then, from the psychedelic psychedelic-hued yet tender Smut-Maker, to the starker, refulgent rituals performed in the Absence of Ganymede, to the endlessly self-consuming and regurgitating, exposing and occulting underreef, one feels one's own brain begin to be remade by contact with the books themselves. In reading Corrao, I am not only dazzled by the invention and classicism, but inspired by an instinct towards aesthetics and pleasure, and an instinct both to record the deformations wrought by a traumatic world and to find in that deformation a curious new form, an extremophile and unexpected survivorship. Encountered together, shown in Corrao's work, entails an unsummarizable, deluxely confected abundance, allergic to yet sensitized through every surface and orifice to power, force, and violence, which produces strange breaks, bulges, fissures, rifts, blueprints, imprints, emissions, and refrains. In the presence of their work, I am personally inspired to be likewise transmogrified into more strange, less harmful, more redolent, less Cartesian forms. And when in turn I find myself hosting this parasitic thought, I detect a feeling that I can only tolerate in the merest doses, like the light cast by the lanternfish at the bottom of the sea. It is the dawn I look for. It is a microdose of hope. So our first reader will be Mike Corrao.
Thank you. Glad to be a parasite for you. Tonight I'm reading from an upcoming book called The Persimmons in the Men. In this next scene, you are occupying something malleable. It is an object that can be molded the same as mud or clay. We are standing completely still. This spot is deserted and pitch black. Can you feel the flesh? It is not always meat. There are other materials, equally fragile, sewn onto the skeletal frame just the same. What do you wish to summon? What do you wish to see? We can't come in unless you want to. Death is not death. It is a radical undoing of your position in space. The sudden or agonizingly slow changes of volume, mass, density. You are not stuck. Your heart has the capacity to become a lung or a liver, but it is time to construct the shrine, burn the candles, dissect the persimmon, kiss the flesh, inside out your open cuts, give your blood to the wound, the stone screw. It illuminates in your throat and tightens in your stomach. Can you see what's happening in the pale glow under your translucent skin? The ritual does what you've asked it to. It rearranges your body in a new shape. Everything unravels. Ecdysis draperies lay in loose coils. We examine your remains for medical, metaphysical, political reasons. While your underbelly lays bare and tender, your musculature begs to be liquefied. Amorphous blob, gelatinous creature, living stem. Our anatomy can be traced back to a nodal point. A blob is a transitional state of being. A blob is a malleable container. Slime is defined by its soft texture and decentralized anatomy. It only moves when material has gathered enough that it is no longer able to maintain its shape, when gravity has finally grated away at its will. I cannot be untangled from my root organism. The torso is an irreducible node of the body. The birth and extension of new limbs converts the rotund root into a levitating orbit. There is nothing between us. The gateway stretches from anterior to posterior. This is an open line of communication. Your ontology is radical in its instability. The body demands metamorphosis. You cannot expect to remain one way for long. You are cursed by potential. There is a decadent arrangement of materials, as if we were sitting at a dining table, or I at the table, and you on top of it, suspended in gelatin. It is okay to vomit. I am vomiting right now. It's okay to vomit. It is only you and I here. Nymphs lounge in the open water. Meanwhile, you give in to the onset of a new vessel, a new self. Ovid dances over a corpse, what used to be meat. There is something wrong under my skin. I desire to be unrecognizable. When I am cut open, it is not flesh that you see. Okay. Dream. The shrine spawns luminous shadows with features you cannot quite interpret. They mount your body and caress the edges of your open chest, kissing the boundaries of the portal, pressing their tongues on the torso's labia and running their chins over the soft tissue. They penetrate your center and submerge their sex in the red veil of the abyss. This is the erotic morphological communique. I won't be content until it's completely destroyed. The torso is an abstract mechanism. In times of radical instability, the times that you live in now, it is subject to frequent and seemingly unpredictable changes. When we return, you become a wide wooden plank with metal stakes emerging from the surface. This new anatomy renders your body a tool for ceremony, sacrifice. You lure subjects onto your chest and embrace them, letting their weight press onto the stakes until the flesh breaks and blood is pouring down each shaft onto the plate below. You consume the flood and let it cake your interior. You are a tool for creating corpses, for converting people into limp sacks. A diagram of the new self, a bed of stakes, an addiction to blood. The skin is better exercised as wooden panels. If it is weak, everything will peel away. You'll be forced to reveal what's underneath. I hope you know that we can't return to the familiar now. An arcane procedure creates a wound that can't be healed. It is an unspoken agreement. The torso returning is first depicted as a small bundle of red pink matter bound in a brace of ribs. An elaborate arrangement of organs is trying to escape. 100 phantom limbs pressing out, out, out. The arbor becomes a landmine. The arbor bends like witches in flight. The ceremony of your duty makes you nauseous. You can't tune in unless you want to. The after image is a sultry darkness. The skin of your forearm and calves smooth into bulbs of water. They sink into the floor and the walls, whatever you can press yourself against. It is difficult to tell whether you are walking or hovering. Every dreadful wound will heal eventually. If we are quiet enough, the vapors will cool and condense. They'll gather into a shape you feel more comfortable holding on to. This is the height of fashion. On phantom limbs, the phantom limb is defined by its anti-corporeality. It is an ethereal entity, the silhouette of an arm, the outline of a leg. The torso absorbs its basest flesh until every pocket of air has been filled. The phantom limb is an object of non-flesh, then we must assume that it is made of something else, that it is not subject to radical transformations of death. You suffer a series of dreams that suggest that these entities are some kind of neural structure, that they are extensions of the unconscious, growing beyond its physical constraints. You feel the desire to move beyond your physical constraints. Meanwhile, the onset of another transformation. Condensation creates a node. The root is suspended and flirting with blood. It appears in your dreams like a miracle or a portal to hell. The node cannot speak. There is no mouth to tell us whether this thing is an object or a subject. It comes into being suddenly, submerged in the apiary, suspended in raw honey. You fantasize about the pale and brittle structures forming in the semi-permeable spaces between the torso and the honey. Through the gauntlet of bodily mutations, there is an inevitable mutation of desire as well. The mirror creates a secondary image that overlaps, nearly replaces the original. An oracular scene. Your honeyed vessel slouches in the heat. Dance with me. I feel the onset of anxiety. Everything is shivering and quiet. As quickly as you are conceived, you are diffused into a thin mist. There is sugar hovering in the air. The desert flattens you into a sheet of glass. You evaporate the desert into a void of particles. What do you wish to summon? What do you wish to see? The ozone layer swirls your body into a meteor of sugars. What good is the persimmon? Do you remember the Iron Maiden sleeping bag? I'm not interested in devices. You're speaking through an arrangement of mirrors. There's no direct connection between us. At least normally there isn't. I want to undo that if I can, considering the circumstances. Have you ever eaten a lemon on its own? Have you ever been into the skin and felt the oils fill your mouth? Please don't let me fall apart. The boundary shatters and you feel your consciousness descending. The body is a topographical object. We are traversing the width of your stomach. Our focal point is the interaction between subjects and their environment, between facets of the environment, between environments. What is a vice? In the minefield of speech, a murmuration. Your weight flams across the width of the planet, becoming Gaia, the fractalizing torso. Each appendage is a grain of sand, moved by wind or willpower. I map out the passage from your stomach to your chest, following the exact procedures of a psychogeographic line. My trajectory has been determined. I am moving along the infinite, entering its canal as your shadow blocks the sun. During my second passage, the lines have shifted. A and B are skewed by unknown variables. A Cartesian plane casts lattice shadows over the sand. The wind uproots 1,000 plastic limbs from your body. You sense a displacement. It curves you into a new shape. It softens you into a set of interlocking rings, coiling and repulsive, becoming meat once again, an homage to me. The great ephemeral skin alludes to an anatomy that we are always outside of. The Mobius strip curves through the esophagus, the intestines, the anus, and back without ever touching the interior. You are denied the pleasures of interior. You are not welcome inside. You lack a stable architecture. A building is not only wall, it is the floors and the ceilings as well. Every room that compartmentalizes the whole. Unsew the quintessential facets of the body. Reduce the torso into its unwieldy matrices. I am fixated on obliteration. There is no death. This is not death, it is merely transformation. We are crossing the subject-object divide, subject to object to super-subject. The super-subject exists above the subject. It is a teeny body projected horizontally with its palms pressed outwards. There is no point in acting surprise. What distance exists between you and I? Where we find ourselves now? Are you in front of me, over my shoulder, below me? I feel as if I could face completely through you. In this scene, it has only been an hour. Thank you.
Day 24, 10 at night. We're planning something extraordinary. That's the reason for the animals, the constellations, the moths, the fairy tales, going into a cyber main street, prioritizing how and what we were sourcing. I had to do a fair amount of research. A lot of the skills I took to prepare for the planning of this event were not wholly unrelated to the skills I acquired in my years of training. The irony is that we never planned to plan something extraordinary. In fact, that was the whole point, that what was extraordinary was what we had not been planning but doing all along. What ended up mixing this notion up was the fact that it wasn't solely our affair to plan or to not plan. Even though we agreed from the get-go we would have our own boundaries and stick to them, we would have our own bottom lines. Each step along the way, a new idea would enter into the planning process and it would become more extraordinary. In the beginning, often the new idea wasn't our own idea by any measure, and so it was difficult to know how to put ourselves in it, and so it felt far from extraordinary. Generally, it just felt like we were taking it because that's what you did. Again, all of this is contrary to our original boundaries, what we initially agreed upon. This is what stressed me out at first. Suddenly, all of our original plans to not plan something extraordinary were thrown out of the window, and we were just being swept away by this and that, and I could already sense the resentment brewing. And then the more I thought about it, the more I noticed that I wanted to think more about all the little details. And at first, I wasn't sure if it was because it was eroding away my boundaries, and that was a bad thing, or if it was readjusting my boundaries, and that was okay, because maybe our original boundaries weren't so well thought of. After all, maybe we were just sticking to it because we got the idea that's what was best, that's who we were, and that's what we wanted. Like, are we frivolous people? Certainly sometimes, and maybe we should be glad to be so. What was at first one person's idea of extraordinary, and thus our idea of poverty, of life and dreaming, became less a matter of opposites and more a matter of deciding what was for us, what percentage of our total caring would go into this particular portion, what of this extraordinary would arrive from our own doing, our own meticulous, dreamed doing. I have never planned something on this level. The more I go deeper into the planning, the more this extraordinary event begins to dwarf me. I think I return here in part because there is something to be said about this dwarfing, or rather, there is something I have sensed before elsewhere related to this aspect of being dwarfed by something both extraordinary and entirely received, something entered into without any intention, entered into as though being swept into it by something ordinary. And it is actually this combination of effects that results in something pathetically extraordinary. It is the fact that time is lost as one is dwarfed, that something extraordinary arises, but that's not all it is either. It's really this frivolous poverty as time is lost as one is being dwarfed, and it's really the movement from a person that is insouciant and incapable of letting other people down, and especially those who really don't deserve it or are capable, and it's really the movement from this person of insouciance and immaturity amidst a frivolous poverty, amidst time lost, amidst carnage changing into a mindset that is extraordinary. Actually, we see the person become a mindset, become a person, and that is extraordinary. Day 29, 11 in the morning. I have come to the realization that it might not be totally crazy to expect an uneven contribution between the community members, especially in the event that we are bound by the old neighborhood, where prices may have lowered recently, but are still exponentially greater than the next 20 richest neighborhoods combined. If we love trees and fresh air so much, why don't we go somewhere that is not even compiled in the 20 richest neighborhoods, not even in the top 1,000? I only get one vote. I voted for us to leave, go somewhere very far. I would be most happy in the desert where wildness isn't even measured by a density of greenery, where greenery is different, and I am in love with a different landscape. Nope. I only get one vote, and we have talked about this many times until it escalated into a fight. It always boils down to, I don't have any family. I do. So what? I want to stay near my family. You lied to me. You made it seem like we would live our own life. The people who want to be so tough feel like Play-Doh to me sometimes. Lately, I've been thinking how I had this bird in my hand and it was a strong bird, but it was a strong bird in my hands, happened to be sick, and I can't remember if I handled it correctly. Lately, when we have been lying in bed, I think I can't believe how close I came to handling it all incorrectly. It's one of those questions like, let's say we just continued to be swept away effectively, stayed where we've always been, stayed close to one side, reproduced while I attend this women's reading group, Radical Reproduction. What could we not do that we could do otherwise? I have to pause, but then quickly, I remember many things. Lately, when we've been lying in bed together, I say, this time, we'll make a baby. We can get the sperm, and then we make a baby. So funny. Without a penny to my name, and here I am thinking of reproduction. Without a penny to my name and trying to live in a way that doesn't take and take, and here I am thinking of baby so frivolously. But then I remember how much we die, how easy it is to die, and it makes me feel less guilty. Day 66, 11 at night. I forget how much we've lost from being born from separate worlds. I have to remind myself not to become angry or disappointed, to just be aware of my frustration, which is enough. When I say things over and over again, when I have to explain in a dozen different ways and still I am not completely conveyed, I have to remind myself. When there is a hole between us and a time zone, a hole when we go months without speaking to each other, and then I get a letter in the mail, I get angry and feel disappointment. But really, I haven't sat long enough with my frustration to allow the frustration to be without turning into anger or disappointment. I am allowed to be angry and disappointed, but then what am I filtering out? What piece missing? Have we always spoken different languages? When did I start speaking another language? When did I start losing my first language? Part of my frustration is my own, only part. Part of my frustration must be someone else, but all of my anger and disappointment is my own. They will never understand what it is I say completely, and yet I speak to them. I speak because of them. The way I speak is ingrained with their silences in their speech. I never knew exactly how they resolve things. I imagine now that they simply did because they had no other choice but to do so. Years later, I watched around me as other secrets came out from the cracks of our community, and I wondered what secrets we kept from each other. It's possible to hide more when you are away from each other. But people hide things from each other every day, even when they are right beside one another. In the space we held with each other in our greater community and in the smaller community units, there was a different measure when it came to comfort and appearance. We had different attachments to tradition. I looked around me, for example, at a piece of a wall, and I saw that it could be entirely empty, or it could be filled in a number of ways. It could be filled with family photos, blown-up postcards from business travels, or it could be filled with ancestral scrolls, embroidery, calligraphy. But there was never an in-between. There were members of our great community who were veritable artists for hire. There were members of our great community who each played a part and contributed their small role in what it takes for a whole community to look after each other. We would cook communal meals. We would bring food to each other. We would volunteer. We would drive long distances to pick each other up. We would set alarms in the middle of the night so we would be up and ready to do something for each other. We would share stories of when our parents died and we received a phone call telling us our parents died, and we would convey how it felt to cry out every single last tear inside of us. We would listen to community members tell other community members of their family members dying and how it felt to be so far away from them and not to be able to see them ever again. And we would listen, and hearing these stories, we understood what we understood and maybe also what we did not understand. We would listen from the back seat of the car, and we would watch from the stool in the kitchen, and we would peer down from the landing, and we would look at an empty wall or an overcrowded wall, and some of us grew a sense of longing that they could not ignore inside them. Some of us grew a sense of longing inside that they had the luxury as well to not ignore. And some of us grew a sense of longing that became a type of particularity. And this type of particularity became a type of viewpoint on a way of life. And this type of viewpoint on a way of life became entwined with appearances as well. All full circle. Now I think of what it is I am afraid of losing of this community as we begin the new community. I am afraid of losing this frustration because this frustration is rooted in this longing, and this longing is rooted in this anger and disappointment, and this anger and disappointment is rooted in the tack, and the tack is rooted in the ordinary difficulties of most humans. I do not know if I can shun the lifestyles of the first world without spoiling it all. I do not know if I can pick and choose which elements of the first world to shun and which elements of the first world we will take with us without first having been completely spoiled. It is difficult to know exactly where to draw the line between convenience and thoughtlessness. I went to the convenience store, a nun, former hooker. We say we could go either way. We say we could run in an entirely different direction, into the direction of the oldest technology on earth. Is it because deep down we know there is no happy medium? Or is the happy medium the small town that is big enough to have a general store, a main street? Yesterday, I realized a part of me just can't let go of the crass and the crude and the loudness and the aggression of the community I come from, which is really not representative of the larger community I come from. For what smaller community is, what smaller community can be said to be fully representative of any larger community it is or was a part of. I realized a part of me just can't bear to let go of the crass and the crude and the loudness and the aggression and the playfulness of the way we communicated with each other within this community. I said, I know what she means. I know what she means. I know what she means. The one didn't get me. Later, the one said the one did. But I know the one didn't. Day 73, 9:30 in the morning. I said goodnight. And then there was a silence, and then the one held my hand, and then the one let go, and then I heard the one say, I don't feel good, and I said, where, physically, and the one said, yeah, kind of, and I said, where, all over, and the one said, yeah, and I scratched the one's back, and the one said, it'll go away, and I had just been thinking how the sound of something like planes could sometimes be heard above us, and I wondered if I could hear them now, or if it was something else, and then I thought, it's hard for me to breathe. I can breathe, but I'm trying, and I can't tell if I just need a sip of water, or if I should just stay where I am and let it pass, and then I said, will the light bother you? Are your eyes completely covered? And the one said yes, and I said, I'll only be a minute, go to sleep, and then I found my way in the dark to the bathroom where I realized how loud I was, how loud everything I was, even when trying to be quiet, but I couldn't let that stop me. So I continued, and it did only take a minute, or I was able to do what needed to be done at the bare minimum within just a minute, though I could have continued. I felt I got what I needed to get out of it, or I felt I did what I needed to do to not forget, to not regret. And when I turned off the bathroom light and walked back into the bedroom, and it was completely dark, I paused to let my eyes readjust, and when I felt they had readjusted enough, I still had to fumble slowly around in the dark. And in that time between leaving the bathroom and getting back to bed, I was on my way. I was reaching my hands out, and I was feeling my way through, and I was having this thought, and I wanted to stay there, but I couldn't. Maybe because it was the only part of the day where I had no choice but to be in the dark, like it was good for me or something. Like it was the only part of the 24 hours we were given where I was there in front or behind something that was like a midpoint between endlessness and a mere sliver. I didn't want to lose that feeling, but there was something sweet about risking losing that feeling, because inevitably you lose that feeling eventually anyway. Like there was something sweet and genuine about feeling it without grasping it and not staying up to stay inside it consciously, but rather to recognize it and then to let it slip away. Maybe sometimes the way we feel about someone is wrapped up in their inability to be a person who could exist in the same world as us, is wrapped up in the very fact that we live in two totally different worlds, and there's actually a wall between the two worlds we live in separately, and there's actually more than one wall. There's the wall that separates us, and it's made of cardboard, and however flimsy it seems, we just don't have the tools to penetrate it, or we do, but something else would get in the way, even if we did get through it, even just another layer of cardboard. And so there's this wall, and then there's another wall, but this wall is made of something else, like the scent of something, or the scent of something associated with another dimension. Or maybe this wall is also made of cardboard and another dimension. Or maybe this wall is also made of cardboard and it's very easy to move. It's so easy to move or get through. It's almost a trick, because every time we move it or get through it, we find we are still in our own world, or we find that they do not acknowledge our existence no matter how close we get to them, no matter how much a part of the air that they breathe we literally become. For example, I can know her inside and out. I can be her doppelganger, but I can also not know whether she would ask the kind of question like, will I be better? Because maybe we can be doppelgangers and I can follow her around, but maybe my reality doesn't apply to her reality the way her reality now applies to mine. There are so many moving parts to this puzzle, and every time it looks like we're nearing the end of the tunnel, I see that the tunnel becomes a little longer. Every time I think we've set aside enough into our rainy day fund, the weather defies the laws of chances, and we get a week extra of rain, and then we realize we have nothing left, and we have to borrow some more. There are so many moving parts to this puzzle, and every time I think I'm not too shabby at handling all the pieces to the puzzle, making sure I keep track of which pieces look like each other, which pieces belong near the border, and which pieces belong in another corner, making sure I don't lose a piece to somewhere. I realize I've never done this puzzle before, and I realize the puzzle didn't come with a set number of pieces. No. It's the kind of puzzle that you could keep growing if you wanted to, and it's the kind of puzzle that could be done anytime you want it to be done. And it's the type of puzzle that you set out somewhere like in a public park, and people walk by, and people are set up next to you with their own puzzles, and you have other people's puzzles to compare it to, and you wonder if what you thought was done was really done. Then one day, you're at the park and no one else is there, and it's exactly then you're perfectly content. When you realize you really are done with your puzzle, that you see the way you've done your puzzle is wrong. It looks complete, but it won't hold. There's no way you can actually take it with you anywhere, if that makes sense. There's no way to actually keep it together, show anyone what you've done, all the work you've put into it, all the time really was almost for nothing. Maybe at a certain point we'll have figured it out enough, at least for us to keep it together, at least to a point where enough of it is kept together, that it won't matter what we leave behind. It won't matter what gets dropped to the wayside, because enough of the most important will be taken care of. Anyway, we draw a line. When I got home, I stripped everything off, trusted with my life. If instructions are laid beforehand, instructions down to the wire. She was so good with instructions, it was what made her perspire. Wish I could trust it without instructions, wish for a day without work. She didn't want to blame anyone for her jowl, but it was coming, like time and a rose. Do you think John is scared to look me all the way through? Sometimes I feel like I could be see-through, And that's what I do for John. When John is sleeping tonight, I will send him my thoughts. When you are see-through, that's what you can do. When John is sleeping tonight, I will tell them how they tried to gouge out my third eye, making a clean dig. When I looked in the mirror, it felt as though I never had a third eye, and it cut me to the core. I must confess I felt very empathetic to that core. And then, a few weeks later, why, it started to grow back. What is inside me like melanin, no one can gouge out. That wants this third eye stay. This is enough of a test for John. If John passes this test, well, I don't know. Maybe then I can ask him to confirm. Maybe I can then send out other tests of my complete see-through. John, John, do you know who? Do you see? Have you seen me? Can you tell? Would you tell on me? It's okay. Okay, John. I have passed enough tests for the both of us, and I'll get you in. Why not? Why did we come here? We didn't need to come here, but it was another place for us to go. Did we think we could come here to thresh? Who would think this would be a place for one to do one's threshing? Though we are not brought to any precipice, in the flatness of this place is a hiddenness, a road around which we cannot see beyond the threshing, beyond coming and going. Yet between each hiddenness is there a flatness within which there is a dwelling. That's not why we could have come here, to stay. How did the first two humans come to know how to mate? Sometimes I walk around and think how strange, all of us clothed the way we are. Sometimes I walk around and I notice how one person is clothed the way they are, and then another person is clothed another way, and then the first person makes a street turn, and then another person walks up driveway toward a house, let's say. Do they take off their clothes once they disappear from my view? There was something about this girl that drew Miss Antarctica to her too. It was the way she could make a grown man blush inside by the way she talked, because what she said was serious, that Miss Antarctica always wanted, but had always gone about in the wrong way. If you were left alone for a long enough time with this girl, she would eventually absorb you. If you were left alone in a hatchery, working side by side with this girl, she would eventually absorb all of you, even if she didn't want to. There were only a few structures on the island which announced their presence loudly to the inhabitants of the island. Your eye drew up to it, this structure, but from which center did they emanate? It should be said, however, of these structures, that they did not draw your eye the way a place off island might draw it, the way something one might consider or call a monument might draw your eye. It should be said as well that these structures, which announced their presence, seemed to announce their presence, yes, but unlike other structures one might consider or call a monument for the center from which they emanated this presence could never truly be detected. Did you ever find it strange that the type of person who could be contained, content to be contained, content to go from smooth to sun-baked, did you ever find it strange that the type of person who could go very far into the estuary, could conceive and conceive and conceive, did you ever find it strange that the type of person who could go very far into the estuary would never want to stray? Make sure you are back inside once the outside starts changing. Go outside now before it'll be changing. Outside by the time you need to come back inside. It will be changing soon enough. You won't be able to stay outside long enough. You'll have to start walking back. When you start walking back, you'll be tempted to do so backwards. I will draw your eye very far inside into my monument. I could be John Center. No, though this is a monument, and a monument is a thing the 20 children anywhere else would play their games around, and that's what they want them to do. I will draw your eye towards the flatness around every corner, beneath us and our center. It's a fine feeling when the most monumental thing on this island is the monument on that other little island with the other little freaks. My negotiations with John today have been less productive than usual. I think when we first began negotiating, I was enraptured, though my waters were ostensibly quite still, and John didn't know that I could even have another motive. And though he still may not know that we are the ones who have other motives, I think because my rapture has gone more and more into the background, he feels that this action of negotiating will no longer get him whatever he think I thought I would accompany him on. When I was born, I was already a year old. 1 year, so I'm one of those whose birth year is always bound to be slashed. I was always 1 or 0, 10 or 11, that kind of thing. When I was born, the quilt was not yet handmade. The quilt was machine-born. When I was born, I came out falling towards the ground. I came out falling towards the soil. I came out falling towards the hooves, untangling themselves the way hooves do when frenzy comes, when they sense they are prey, towards these hooves and the broken feet and all the hooves. So, and so, it's high time. Did John Center stop growing to fit the container that held him? Didn't John Center grow only as much until the container said no? Did John try to grow, and then at night when he was put back into his container, his center became blunted? I brace myself in the street. No one knows about my brace but me and one other person who doesn't even know where I belong tonight. When you hear 40 years ago, do you hear today? What about 50? When we first got here, I nodded in disbelief when they mentioned how here nobody locks their doors, how locking a door is an aberration here. It took me 2 months to give it a shot, actually. Still, each time I have a moment, because locking it has become so ingrained in me that I feel they are trying to reach my numb pacifism or something, until they have it, until they have finally found our numb pacifism, and at that point, they can just do whatever they want. Last night I dreamt that my body could float, and it floated until the ceiling was there, and it battered against the ceiling that was there. It battered until with the help of a tornado it flew through it, the ceiling, and then it came to another ceiling, and the tornado moved on, then it came to another ceiling and kept battering at it until a swarm of angels came, but they did not come to rescue me per se. They started taunting me, and one of them played nicer, and one of them played indifferent, and one of them was veritably cruel, but it was the nicer one that wanted something from me, and this something was my liver. You know, they weren't going to hold my hand through it, and I don't know whether I negotiated with them or not. I just remember vividly the way my body encountered the ceiling and battered up against it, and how the tornado seemed to save me, and then tornado would disappear. I've had to become this way, I suppose, so that what you see is what you get has come by way of getting because it saw. I said, well, I can be it, like that. I volunteered. I suppose I came across as some kind of joke, and for a while this threatened to crush me. Somehow it didn't. Somehow I became practically marvelous at jokes until I didn't have to tell a single one. People would be very confused. Sitting at a table, I would say nothing. And then I would ask a question, and then another question, and then another question. And then, as though by accident, although everyone knew it wasn't an accident, I would also tell a joke. Maybe mooning must have been invented on this island, or on an island at least. Yesterday I was walking past the curve where I saw that truck with the peels and the cans and the gallon water jug, and in the window of the house behind it there were two cheeks, the sound of laughter from the bushes, and then fluttering crows, and then wagons, and they ran off. What would happen to us if? How many of us would it take? How few of us do we need? How many of us in a room? How many of us around a table become a single entity? How many cilia on me until I become detectable? What would happen to us if we latched onto the wrong thing, if we mistakenly believed the thing we were latching onto were the thing we were supposed to latch onto when, in fact, it was just the container holding us? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mike and Valerie, for two incredibly distinctive readings. And I have a secret for people who haven't seen their books before. Both of those books post these poems in really interesting theatrical ways, like little paper theaters. So you should come pick up a copy and take a look and see the way those voices play out on the page, because it's pretty unique. Thank you everybody for being super attentive, awesome groovy audience tonight. Thank you to our groovy readers. Thank you to all the staff. And that's it. Let's mingle.